3 steps from the door he trod on a cracker of such exceptional quality that it made a noise like dynamite. He jumped violently, then, in these straits, he smiled exactly as though nothing had happened and took his place before the middle row of benches, stooping sideways, in his customary attitude, and resting one palm on the desk in front of him. But this posture of his was familiar to everybody. Somebody had put some ink on the right spot, and Herr Modersohn's small clumsy hand got all inky. He acted as though he had not noticed, laid his wet black hand on his back, blinked, and said in a soft, weak voice, "The order in the classroom leaves something to be desired." Hanno Buddenbrook loved him in that moment, sat quite still, and looked up into his worried, helpless face. But Wasservogel grunted louder than ever, and a handful of peas went rattling against the window and bounced back into the room. "It's hailing," somebody said, quite loudly. Herr Modersohn appeared to believe this, for he went without more ado to the platform and asked for the register. He needed it to call the names from, for, though he had been teaching the class for 5 or 6 weeks, he hardly knew any of them by name. "Federman," he said, "will you please recite the poem?" "Absent," shouted a chorus of voices. And there sat Federman, large as life, in his place, shooting peas with great skill and accuracy. Herr Modersohn blinked again and selected a new name. "Wasservogel," he said. "Dead," shouted Peterson, attacked by a grim humor. And the chorus, grunting, crowing, and with shouts of derision, asseverated that Wasservogel was dead. Herr Modersohn blinked afresh. He looked about him, drew down his mouth, and put his finger on another name in the register. "Perlman," he said, without much confidence. "Unfortunately, gone mad," uttered Count Maln, with great clarity and precision. And this also was confirmed by the chorus amid an ever-increasing tumult. Then Herr Modersohn stood up and shouted into the hubbub, "Buddenbrook, you will do me 100 lines imposition. If you laugh again, I shall be obliged to mark you." Then he sat down again. It was true that Hanno had laughed. He had been seized by a quiet but violent spasm of laughter, and went on because he could not stop. He had found Kai's joke so good that unfortunately had especially appealed to him. But he became quiet when Herr Modersohn attacked him, and sat looking solemnly into the candidate's face. He observed at that moment every detail of the man's appearance, saw every pathetic little hair in his scanty beard, which showed the skin through it, saw his brown, empty, disconsolate eyes, saw that he had on what appeared to be 2 pairs of cuffs, because the sleeves of his shirt came down so long, saw the whole pathetic, inadequate figure he made. He saw more, he saw into the man's inner self. Hanno Buddenbrook was almost the only pupil whom Herr Modersohn knew by name, and he availed himself of the knowledge to call him constantly to order, give him impositions, and tyrannize over him. He had distinguished Buddenbrook from the others simply because of his quieter behavior, and of this he took advantage to make him feel his authority, an authority he did not dare exert upon the real offenders. Hanno looked at him and reflected that Herr Modersohn's lack of fine feeling made it almost impossible even to pity him. "I don't bully you," he addressed the candidate, in his thoughts, "I don't share in the general tormenting like the others, and how do you repay me? But so it is, and so will it be, always and everywhere," he thought, and fear, and that sensation almost amounting to physical nausea, rose again in him. "And the most dreadful thing is that I can't help seeing through you with such disgusting clearness." At last Herr Modersohn found someone who was neither dead nor crazy, and who would take it upon himself to repeat the English verse. This was a poem called The Monkey, a poor childish composition, required to be committed to memory by these growing lads whose thoughts were already mostly bent on business, on the sea, on the coming conflicts of actual life. Monkey, little, merry fellow, thou art nature's punchinello. There were endless verses. Casaubon read them, quite simply, out of his book. Nobody needed to trouble himself about what Herr Modersohn thought. The noise grew worse and worse, the feet shuffled and scraped on the dusty floor, the cock crowed, the pig grunted, peas filled the air. The 25 were drunk with disorder. And the unregulated instincts of their years awoke. They drew obscene pictures on pieces of paper, passed them about, and laughed at them greedily. All at once everything was still. The pupil who was then reciting interrupted himself, even Herr Modersohn got up and listened. They heard something charming, a pure, bell-like sound, coming from the bottom of the room and flowing sweetly, sensuously, with indescribably tender effect, on the sudden silence. It was a music box which somebody had brought, playing Du liegst mir am Herzen in the middle of the English lesson. But precisely at that moment when the little melody died away, something frightful ensued. It broke like a sudden storm over the heads of the class, unexpected, cruel, overwhelming, paralyzing. Without anybody's having knocked, the door opened wide with a great shove, and a presence came in, high and huge, growled, and stood with a single stride in front of the benches. It was the Lord God. Herr Modersohn grew ashy pale and dragged down the chair from the platform, dusting it with his handkerchief. The pupils had sprung up like one man. They pressed their arms to their sides, stood on their tiptoes, bent their heads, and bit their tongues in the fervor of their devotion. The deepest silence reigned. Somebody gasped with the effort he made, then all was still again. Director Willich measured the saluting columns for a while with his eye. He lifted his arm with its dirty funnel-shaped cuff, and let it fall with the fingers spread out, as if he were attacking a keyboard. "Sit down," he said in his double bass voice. The pupils sank back into their seats. Herr Modersohn pulled up the chair with trembling hands, and the director sat down beside the dais. "Please proceed," he said. That was all, but it sounded as frightful as if the words he uttered had been "Now we shall see," and woe to him who the reason for his coming was clear. Herr Modersohn was to give evidence of his ability to teach, to show what the lower second had learned in the 6 or 7 hours he had been with them. It was a question of Herr Modersohn's existence and future. The candidate was a sorry figure as he stood on the platform and called again on somebody to recite the Monkey. Up to now it had been only the pupils who were examined, but now it was the master as well. Alas, it went badly on both sides. Herr Director Willich's appearance was entirely unexpected, and only 2 or 3 of the pupils were prepared. It was impossible for Herr Modersohn to call up Adolf Totenhaupt for the whole hour on end. After the Monkey had been recited once, it could not be asked for again, and so things were in a bad way. When the reading from Ivanhoe began, young Count Maln was the only person who could translate it at all, he having a personal interest in the novel. The others hemmed and hawed, stuttered, and got hopelessly stuck. Hanno Buddenbrook was called up and could not do a line. Director Willich gave utterance to a sound that was as though the lowest string of his double bass had been violently plucked, and Herr Modersohn wrung his small, clumsy, inky hands repeating plaintively over and over. And it went so well, it always went so well. He was still saying it, half to the pupils and half to the director, when the bell rang. But the Lord God stood erect with folded arms before his chair and stared in front of him over the heads of the class. Then he commanded that the register be brought, and slowly marked down for laziness all those pupils whose performances of the morning had been deficient or entirely lacking 6 or 7 marks at one fell swoop. He could not put down a mark for Herr Modersohn, but he was much worse than the others. He stood there with a face like chalk, broken, done for. Hanno Buddenbrook was among those marked down. And Director Woolach said besides, I will spoil all your careers for you. Then he went. The bell rang, class was over. It was always like that. When you expected trouble it did not come. When you thought all was well then, the catastrophe. It was now impossible for Hanno to go up at Easter. He rose from his seat and went drearily out of the room, seeking the aching back tooth with his tongue. Kai came up to him and put his arm across his shoulders. Together they walked down to the courtyard, among the crowd of excited comrades, all of whom were discussing the extraordinary event. He looked with loving anxiety into Hanno's face and said, Please forgive, Hanno, for translating. It would have been better to keep still and get a mark. It's so cheap, didn't I say what Patula Jovis Arbori meant, answered Hanno. Don't mind, Kai. That doesn't matter. One just mustn't mind. I suppose that's true. Well, the Lord God is going to ruin your career. You may as well resign yourself, Hanno, because if it is his inscrutable will. Career, what a lovely word career is. Herr Modersohn's career is spoiled too. He will never get to be a master, poor chap. There are assistant masters, you may know, and there are headmasters, but never by any chance a plain master. This is a mystery not to be revealed to youthful minds, it is only intended for grown ups and persons of mature experience. An ordinary intelligence might say that either one is a master or one is not. I might go up to the Lord God or Herr Morozk and explain this to him. But what would be the result? They would consider it an insult, and I should be punished for insubordination, all for having discovered for them a much higher significance in their calling than they themselves were aware of. No, let's not talk about them, they're all thick-skinned brutes. They walked about the court, Kai made jokes to help Hanno forget his bad mark, and Hanno listened and enjoyed. Look, here is a door, an outer door. It is open, and outside there is the street. How would it be if we were to go out and take a little walk? It is recess, and we have still 6 minutes. We could easily be back in time. But it is perfectly impossible. You see what I mean? Here is the door. It is open, there is no grating, there is nothing whatever to prevent us. And yet it is impossible for us to step outside for even a second, it is even impossible for us to think of doing so. Well, let's not think of it, then. Let's take another example, we don't say, for instance, that it is nearly 12:30. No, we say, it's nearly time for the geography period. You see? Now, I ask, is this any sort of a life to lead? Everything is wrong. Oh, Lord, if the institution would just once let us out of her loving embrace. Well, and what then? No, Kai, we should just have to do something then, here, at least we are taken care of. Since my father died, Herr Stefan Kistenmaker and Pastor Pringsheim have taken over the business of asking me every day what I want to be. I don't know. I can't answer. I can't be anything. I'm afraid of everything. How can anybody talk so dismally? What about your music? What about my music, Kai? There is nothing to it. Shall I travel round and give concerts? In the first place, they wouldn't let me, and in the second place, I should never really know enough. I can play very little. I can only improvise a little when I am alone. And then, the traveling about must be dreadful, I imagine. It is different with you. You have more courage. You go about laughing at it all, you have something to set against it. You want to write, to tell wonderful stories. Well, That is something. You will surely become famous, you are so clever. The thing is, you are so much livelier. Sometimes in class we look at each other, the way we did when Peterson got marked because he read out of a crib, when all the rest of us did the same. The same thought is in both our minds, but you know how to make a face and let it pass. I can't. I get so tired of things. I'd like to sleep and never wake up. I'd like to die, Kai. No, I am no good. I can't want anything. I don't even want to be famous. I'm afraid of it, just as much as if it were a wrong thing to do. Nothing can come of me, that is perfectly sure. One day, after confirmation class, I heard Pastor Pringsheim tell somebody that one must just give me up, because I come of a decayed family. Did he say that? Kai asked with deep interest. Yes, he meant my uncle Christian, in the institution in Hamburg. One must just give me up. Oh, I'd be so happy if they would. I have so many worries, everything is so hard for me. If I give myself a little cut or bruise anywhere, and make a wound that would heal in a week with anybody else, it takes a month with me. It gets inflamed and infected and makes me all sorts of trouble. Herr Brecht told me lately that all my teeth are in a dreadful condition, not to mention the ones that have been pulled already. If they are like that now, what will they be when I am 30 or 40 years old? I am completely discouraged. Oh, come, Kai said, and struck into a livelier gait. Now you must tell me something about your playing. I want to write something marvelous, perhaps I'll begin it today, in drawing period. Will you play this afternoon? Hanno was silent a moment. A flush came upon his face, and a painful, confused look. Yes, I'll play, I suppose, though I ought not. I ought to practice my sonatas and etudes and then stop. But I suppose I'll play, I cannot help it, though it only makes everything worse. Worse. Hanno was silent. I know what you mean, said Kai after a bit, and then neither of the lads spoke again. They were both at the same difficult age. Kai's face burned, and he cast down his eyes. Hanno looked pale and serious, his eyes had clouded over, and he kept giving sideways glances. Then the bell rang, and they went up. The geography period came next, and an important test on the kingdom of Hesse-Nassau. A man with a red beard and brown tailcoat came in. His face was pale, and his hands were very full of pores, but without a single hair. This was the clever one, Dr. Mussum. He suffered from occasional hemorrhages, and always spoke in an ironic tone, because it was his pose to be considered as witty as he was ailing. He possessed a Heine collection, a quantity of papers and objects connected with that cynical and sickly poet. He proceeded to mark the boundaries of Hesse-Nassau on the map that hung on the wall, and then asked, with a melancholy, mocking smile, if the gentlemen would indicate in their books the important features of the country. It was as though he meant to make game of the class and of Hesse-Nassau as well, yet this was an important test, and much dreaded by the entire form. Hanno Buddenbrook knew next to nothing about Hesse-Nassau. He tried to look on Adolf Tottenhocht's book, but Heinrich Heine, who had a penetrating observation despite his suffering, melancholy air, pounced on him at once and said, Herr Buddenbrook, I am tempted to ask you to close your book, but that I suspect you would be glad to have me do so. Go on with your work. The remark contained two witticisms. First, that Dr. Mussum addressed Hanno as Herr Buddenbrook, and, second, that about the copy-book. Hanno continued to brood over his book, and handed it in almost empty when he went out with Kai. The difficulties were now over with for the day. The fortunate ones who had come through without marks, had light and easy consciences, and life seemed like play to them as they betook themselves to the large well-lighted room where they might sit and draw under the supervision of Herr Dragamuller. Plaster casts from the antique stood about the room, and there was a great cupboard containing divers pieces of wood and doll furniture which served as models. Herr Dragamuller was a thick-set man with a full round beard and a smooth, cheap brown wig which stood out in the back of the neck and betrayed itself. He possessed two wigs, one with longer hair, the other with shorter. If he had had his beard cut he would don the shorter wig as well. He was a man with some droll peculiarities of speech. For instance, he called a lead pencil a lead. He gave out an oily alcoholic odor, and it was said of him that he drank petroleum. It always delighted him to have an opportunity to take a class in something besides drawing. On such occasions he would lecture on the policy of Bismarck, accompanying himself with impressive spiral gestures from his nose to his shoulder. Social democracy was his bugbear. He spoke of it with fear and loathing. "We must keep together," he used to say to refractory pupils, pinching them on the arm. Social democracy is at the door. He was possessed by a sort of spasmodic activity, would sit down next a pupil, exhaling a strong spirit-use odor, tap him on the forehead with his seal ring, shoot out certain isolated words and phrases like perspective, light and shade, the lead, social democracy, stick together, and then dash off again. Kai worked at his new literary project during this period, and Hanno occupied himself with conducting, in fancy, an overture with full orchestra. Then school was over, they fetched down their things, the gate was opened, they were free to pass, and they went home. Hanno and Kai went the same road together as far as the little red villa, their books under their arms. Young Count Maln had a good distance farther to go alone before he reached the paternal dwelling. He never wore an overcoat. The morning's fog had turned to snow, which came down in great white flocks and rapidly became slush. They parted at the Buddenbrook gate, but when Hanno was halfway up the garden Kai came back to put his arm about his neck. "Don't give up, better not play," he said gently. Then his slender, careless figure disappeared in the whirling snow. Hanno put down his books on the bear's tray in the corridor and went into the living room to see his mother. She sat on the sofa reading a book with a yellow paper cover, and looked up as he crossed the room. She gazed at him with her brown, close-set, blue-shadowed eyes. As he stood before her, she took his head in both her hands and kissed him on the brow. He went upstairs, where Fräulein Clementine had some luncheon ready for him, washed, and ate. When he was done he took out of his desk a packet of little biting Russian cigarettes and began to smoke. He was no stranger to their use by now. Then he sat down at the harmonium and played something from Bach, something very severe and difficult, in fugue form. At length he clasped his hands behind his head and looked out the window at the snow noiselessly tumbling down. Nothing else was to be seen, for there was no longer a charming little garden with a plashing fountain beneath his window. The view was cut off by the grey side wall of the neighbouring villa. Dinner was at 4 o'clock, and Hanno, his mother, and Fräulein Clementine sat down to it. Afterward Hanno saw that there were preparations for music in the salon, and awaited his mother at the piano. They played the Sonata Opus 24 of Beethoven. In the Adagio the violin sang like an angel, but Gerda took the instrument from her chin with a dissatisfied air, looked at it in irritation, and said it was not in time. She played no more, but went up to rest. Hanno remained in the salon. He went to the glass door that led out on the small veranda and looked into the drenched garden. But suddenly he took a step back and jerked the cream-colored curtains across the door, so that the room lay in a soft yellow twilight. Then he went to the piano. He stood for a while, and his gaze, directed fixed and unseeing upon a distant point, altered slowly, grew blurred and vague and shadowy. He sat down at the instrument and began to improvise. It was a simple motif which he employed a mere trifle, an unfinished fragment of melody in 1.5 bars. He brought it out first, with unsuspected power, in the bass, as a single voice, indicating it as the source and fount of all that was to come, and announcing it, with a commanding entry, by a burst of trumpets. It was not quite easy to grasp his intention, but when he repeated and harmonized it in the treble, with a timbre like dull silver, it proved to consist essentially of a single resolution, a yearning and painful melting of one tone into another, a short-winded, pitiful invention, which nevertheless gained a strange, mysterious, and significant value precisely by means of the meticulous and solemn precision with which it was defined and produced. And now there began more lively passages, a restless coming and going of syncopated sound, seeking, wandering, torn by shrieks like a soul in unrest and tormented by some knowledge it possesses and cannot conceal, but must repeat in ever different harmonies, questioning, complaining, protesting, demanding, dying away. The syncopation increased, grew more pronounced, driven hither and thither by scampering triplets, the shrieks of fear recurred, they took form and became melody. There was a moment when they dominated, in a mounting, imploring chorus of wind instruments that conquered the endlessly thronging, welling, wandering, vanishing harmonies, and swelled out in unmistakable simple rhythms, a crushed, childlike, imposing, imploring chorale. This concluded with a sort of ecclesiastical cadence. A fair maid followed, a silence. And then, quite softly, in a timbre of dull silver, there came the first motif again, the paltry invention, a figure either tiresome or obscure, a sweet, sentimental dying away of one tone into another. This was followed by a tremendous uproar, a wild activity, punctuated by notes like fanfares, expressive of violent resolve. What was coming? Then came horns again, sounding the march. There was an assembling, a concentrating, firm, consolidated rhythms, and a new figure began, a bold improvisation, a sort of lively, stormy hunting song. There was no joy in this hunting song, its note was one of defiant despair. Signals sounded through it, yet they were not only signals but cries of fear, while throughout, winding through it all, through all the writhen, bizarre harmonies, came again that mysterious first motif, wandering in despair, torturingly sweet. And now began a ceaseless hurry of events whose sense and meaning could not be guessed, a restless flood of sound adventures, rhythms, harmonies, welling up uncontrolled from the keyboard, as they shaped themselves under Hanno's laboring fingers. He experienced them, as it were, he did not know them beforehand. He sat a little bent over the keys, with parted lips and deep, far gaze, his brown hair covering his forehead with its soft curls. What was the meaning of what he played? Were these images of fearful difficulties surmounted, flames passed through and torrents swum, castles stormed, and dragons slain? But always now like a yelling laugh, now like an ineffably sweet promise, the original motif wound through it all, the pitiful phrase with its notes melting into one another. Now the music seemed to rouse itself to new and gigantic efforts, wild runs in octaves followed, sounding like shrieks, an irresistible mounting, a chromatic upward struggle, a wild relentless longing, abruptly broken by startling, arresting pianissimi which gave a sensation as if the ground were disappearing from beneath one's feet, or like a sudden abandonment and sinking into a gulf of desire. Once, far off and softly warning, sounded the first chords of the imploring prayer, but the flood of rising cacophonies overwhelmed them with their rolling, streaming, clinging, sinking, and struggling up again, as they fought on toward the end that must come this very moment, at the height of this fearful climax, for the pressure of longing had become intolerable. And it came, it could no longer be kept back, those spasms of yearning could not be prolonged. And it came as though curtains were rent apart, doors sprang open, thorn hedges parted of themselves, walls of flame sank down. The resolution, the redemption, the complete fulfillment, a chorus of jubilation burst forth, and everything resolved itself in a harmony, and the harmony, in sweet retardando, at once sank into another. It was the motif, the first motif. And now began a festival, a triumph, an unbounded orgy of this very figure, which now displayed a wealth of dynamic color which passed through every octave, wept and shivered in tremolo, sang, rejoiced, and sobbed in exultation, triumphantly adorned with all the bursting, tinkling, foaming, purling resources of orchestral pomp. The fanatical worship of this worthless trifle, this scrap of melody, this brief, childish harmonic invention only a bar and a half in length, had about it something stupid and gross, and at the same time something ascetic and religious, something that contained the essence of faith and renunciation. There was a quality of the perverse in the insatiability with which it was produced and revelled in, there was a sort of cynical despair, there was a longing for joy, a yielding to desire, in the way the last drop of sweetness was, as it were, extracted from the melody, till exhaustion, disgust, and satiety supervened. Then, at last, in the weariness after excess, a long, soft arpeggio in the minor trickled through, mounted a tone, resolved itself in the major, and died in mournful lingering away. Hanno sat still a moment, his chin on his breast, his hands in his lap. Then he got up and closed the instrument. He was very pale, there was no strength in his knees, and his eyes were burning. He went into the next room, stretched himself on the chaise lounge, and remained for a long time motionless. Later there was supper, and he played a game of chess with his mother, at which neither side won. But until after midnight he still sat in his room, before his harmonium, and played in thought only, for he must make no noise. He did this despite his firm intention to get up the next morning at 5:30, to do some most necessary preparation. This was one day in the life of little Johann. Chapter 3 Cases of typhoid fever take the following course. The patient feels depressed and moody, a condition which grows rapidly worse until it amounts to acute despondency. At the same time he is overpowered by physical weariness, not only of the muscles and sinews, but also of the organic functions, in particular of the digestion, so that the stomach refuses food. There is a great desire for sleep, but even in conditions of extreme fatigue the sleep is restless and superficial and not refreshing. There is pain in the head, the brain feels dull and confused, and there are spells of giddiness. An indefinite ache is felt in all the bones. There is blood from the nose now and then, without apparent cause. This is the onset. Then comes a violent chill which seizes the whole body and makes the teeth chatter, the fever sets in, and is immediately at its height. Little red spots appear on the breast and abdomen, about the size of a lentil. They go away when pressed by the finger, but return at once. The pulse is unsteady, there are about 100 pulsations to the minute. The temperature goes up to 104 degrees. Thus passes the first week. In the second week the patient is free from pain in the head and limbs, but the giddiness is distinctly worse, and there is so much humming in the ears that he is practically deaf. The facial expression becomes dull, the mouth stands open, the eyes are without life. The consciousness is blurred, desire for sleep takes entire possession of the patient, and he often sinks, not into actual sleep, but into a leaden lethargy. At other intervals there are the loud and excited ravings of delirium. The patient's helplessness is complete, and his uncleanliness becomes repulsive. His gums, teeth, and tongue are covered with a blackish deposit which makes his breath foul. He lies motionless on his back, with distended abdomen. He has sunk down in the bed, with his knees wide apart. Pulse and breathing are rapid, jerky, superficial, and labored. The pulse is fluttering, and gallops 120 to the minute. The eyelids are half closed, the cheeks are no longer glowing, but have assumed a bluish color. The red spots on breast and abdomen are more numerous. The temperature reaches 105.8 degrees. In the third week the weakness is at its height. The patient raves no longer. Who can say whether his spirit is sunk in empty night or whether it lingers, remote from the flesh, in far, deep, quiet dreams, of which he gives no sound and no sign. He lies in total insensibility. This is the crisis of the disease. In individual cases the diagnosis is sometimes rendered more difficult, as, for example, when the early symptoms depression, weariness, lack of appetite, headache, and unquiet sleep are nearly all present while the patient is still going about in his usual health, when they are scarcely noticeable as anything out of the common, even if they are suddenly and definitely increased. But a clever doctor, of real scientific acumen like, for example, Dr. Langhals, the good-looking Dr. Langhals with the small, hairy hands will still be in a position to call the case by its right name, and the appearance of the red spots on the chest and abdomen will be conclusive evidence that his diagnosis was correct. He will know what measures to take and what remedies to apply. He will arrange for a large, well-aired room, the temperature of which must not be higher than 70 degrees. He will insist on absolute cleanliness, and by means of frequent shifting and changes of linen will keep the patient free from bedsores if possible. In some cases it is not possible. He will have the mouth frequently cleansed with moist linen rags. As for treatment, preparations of iodine, potash, quinine, and antipyrin are indicated with a diet as light and nourishing as possible, for the patient's stomach and bowels are profoundly attacked by the disease. He will treat the consuming fever by means of frequent baths, into which the patient will often be put every 3 hours, day and night, cooling them gradually from the foot end of the tub, and always, after each bath, administering something stimulating, like brandy or champagne. But all these remedies he uses entirely at random, in the hope that they may be of some use in the case, ignorant whether any one of them will have the slightest effect. For there is one thing which he does not know at all, with respect to one fact, he labors in complete darkness. Up to the third week, up to the very crisis of the disease, he cannot possibly tell whether this illness, which he calls typhoid, is an unfortunate accident, the disagreeable consequence of an infection which might perhaps have been avoided, and which can be combated with the resources of medical science, or whether it is, quite simply, a form of dissolution, the garment, as it were, of death. And then, whether death choose to assume this form or another is all the same against him, there is no remedy. Cases of typhoid take the following course: when the fever is at its height, life calls to the patient, calls out to him as he wanders in his distant dream, and summons him in no uncertain voice. The harsh, imperious call reaches the spirit on that remote path that leads into the shadows, the coolness and peace. He hears the call of life, the clear, fresh, mocking summons to return to that distant scene which he has already left so far behind him, and already forgotten. And there may well up in him something like a feeling of shame for a neglected duty, a sense of renewed energy, courage, and hope. He may recognize a bond existing still between him and that stirring, colorful, callous existence which he thought he had left so far behind him. Then, however far he may have wandered on his distant path, he will turn back and live. But if he shudders when he hears life's voice, if the memory of that vanished scene and the sound of that lusty summons make him shake his head, Make him put out his hand to ward it off as he flies forward in the way of escape that has opened to him, then it is clear that the patient will die. Chapter 4. It is not right, it is not right, Gerda, said old Fräulein Wakebrod, perhaps for the 100th time. Her voice was full of reproach and distress. She had a sofa place today in the circle that sat round the center table in the drawing room of her former pupil. Gerda Buddenbrook, Frau Pirmander, her daughter Erika, poor Clotilde, and the three Mrs. Buddenbrook made up the group. The green cap strings still fell down upon the old lady's childish shoulders, but she had grown so tiny, with her 75 years of life, that she could scarcely raise her elbow high enough to gesticulate above the surface of the table. No, it is not right, and so I tell you, Gerda, she repeated. She spoke with such warmth that her voice trembled. I have one foot in the grave, my time is short, and you can think of leaving me, of leaving us all forever. If it were just a visit to Amsterdam that you were thinking of, but to leave us forever. She shook her bird-like old head vigorously, and her brown eyes were clouded with her distress. It is true, you have lost a great deal. No, she has not lost a great deal, she has lost everything, said Frau Pirmander. We must not be selfish, Therese. Gerda wishes to go, and she is going, that is all. She came with Thomas, 21 years ago, and we all loved her, though she very likely didn't like any of us. No, you didn't, Gerda, don't deny it, but Thomas is no more, and nothing is any more. What are we to her? Nothing. We feel it very much, we cannot help feeling it, but yet I say, go, with God's blessing, Gerda, and thanks for not going before, when Thomas died. It was an autumn evening, after supper. Little Johann, Justus, Johann, Caspar, had been lying for nearly 6 months, equipped with the blessing of Pastor Pringsheim, out there at the edge of the little grove, beneath the sandstone cross, beneath the family arms. The rain rustled the half-leafless trees in the avenue, and sometimes gusts of wind drove it against the window panes. All 8 ladies were dressed in black. The little family had gathered to take leave of Gerda Buddenbrook, who was about to leave the town and return to Amsterdam, to play duets once more with her old father. No duties now restrained her. Frau Pirmander could no longer oppose her decision. She said it was right, she knew it must be so, but in her heart she mourned over her sister-in-law's departure. If the senator's widow had remained in the town, and kept her station and her place in society, and left her property where it was, there would still have remained a little prestige to the family name. But let that be as it must, Frau Antony was determined to hold her head high while she lived and there were people to look at her. Had not her grandfather driven with 4 horses all over the country? Despite the stormy life that lay behind her, and despite her weak digestion, she did not look her 50 years. Her skin was a little faded and downy, and a few hairs grew on her upper lip, the pretty upper lip of Tony Buddenbrook. But there was not a white hair in the smooth coiffure beneath the morning cap. Poor Clotilde bore up under the departure of her relative, as one must bear up under the afflictions of this life. She took it with patience and tranquility. She had done wonders at the supper table, and now she sat among the others, lean and grey as of yore, and her words were drawling and friendly. Erika Weinschenk, now 31 years old, was likewise not one to excite herself unduly over her aunt's departure. She had lived through worse things, and had early learned resignation. Submission was her strongest characteristic. One read it in her weary light blue eyes, the eyes of Bendix Grunlich, and heard it in the tones of her patient, sometimes plaintive voice. The 3 Mrs. Buddenbrook, Uncle Gotthold's daughters, wore their old affronted and critical air. Friedrich and Henriette, the eldest, had grown leaner and more angular with the years, while Fifi, the youngest, now 53 years old, was much too little and fat. Old Frau Consul Kroger, Uncle Justice' widow, had been asked too, but she was rather ailing, or perhaps she had no suitable gown to put on, one couldn't tell which. They talked about Gerda's journey and the train she was to take, about the sale of the villa and its furnishings, which Herr Gosch had undertaken. For Gerda was taking nothing with her, she was going away as she had come. Then Frau Pirmander began to talk about life. She was very serious and made observations upon the past and the future, though of the future there was in truth almost nothing to be said. When I am dead, she declared, Erika may move away if she likes. But as for me, I cannot live anywhere else, and so long as I am on earth, we will come together here, we who are left. Once a week you will come to dinner with me and we will read the family papers. She put her hand on the portfolio that lay before her on the table. Yes, Gerda, I will take them over, and be glad to have them. Well, that is settled. Do you hear, Tilda? Though it might exactly as well be you who should invite us, for you are just as well off as we are now. Yes, so it goes. I've struggled against fate, and done my best, and you have just sat there and waited for everything to come round. But you are a goose, you know, all the same. Please don't mind if I say so. Oh, Tony, Clotilde said, smiling. I am sorry I cannot say goodbye to Christian, said Gerda, and the talk turned aside to that subject. There was small prospect of his ever coming out of the institution in which he was confined, although he was probably not too bad to go about in freedom. But the present state of things was very agreeable for his wife. She was, Frau Pirmander asserted, in league with the doctor, and Christian would, in all probability, end his days where he was. There was a pause. They touched delicately and with hesitation upon recent events, and when one of them let fall little Johann's name, it was still in the room, except for the sound of the rain, which fell faster than before. This silence lay like a heavy secret over the events of Hanno's last illness. It must have been a frightful onslaught. They did not look in each other's eyes as they talked, their voices were hushed, and their words were broken. But they spoke of one last episode, the visit of the little ragged count who had almost forced his way to Hanno's bedside. Hanno had smiled when he heard his voice, though he hardly knew anyone, and Kai had kissed his hands again and again. He kissed his hands, asked the Buddenbrook ladies. Yes, over and over. They all thought for a while of this strange thing, and then suddenly Frau Pirmander burst into tears. I loved him so much, she sobbed. You don't any of you know how much more than any of you. Yes, forgive me, Gerda, you are his mother. Oh, he was an angel. He is an angel, now, corrected Sesame. Hanno, little Hanno, went on Frau Pirmander, the tears flowing down over her soft faded cheeks. Tom, father, grandfather, and all the rest. Where are they? We shall see them no more. Oh, it is so sad, so hard. There will be a reunion, said Friedrich Buddenbrook. She folded her hands in her lap, cast down her eyes, and put her nose in the air. Yes, they say so. Oh, there are times, Friedrich, when that is no consolation, God forgive me. When one begins to doubt justice and goodness and everything. Life crushes so much in us, it destroys so many of our beliefs. A reunion, if that were so. But now Sesame Wakebroad stood up, as tall as ever she could. She stood on tiptoe, rapped on the table, the cap shook on her old head. It is so, she said, with her whole strength, and looked at them all with a challenge in her eyes. She stood there, a victor in the good fight which all her life she had waged against the assaults of reason, hump-backed, tiny, quivering with the strength of her convictions, a little prophetess, admonishing and inspired. The end. A note on the type in which this book is set. This book is composed on the linotype in Bodoni, so called after its designer, Giambattista Bodoni, 1740–1813, a celebrated Italian scholar and printer. Bodoni planned his type especially for use on the more smoothly finished papers that came into vogue late in the 18th century, and drew his letters with a mechanical regularity that is readily apparent on comparison with the less formal old style. Other characteristics that will be noted are the square serifs without fillet and the marked contrast between the light and heavy strokes. Set up, electrotyped and printed by the Vale Ballou Press Incorporated, Binghamton, NY. Paper manufactured by W. C. Hamilton and Sons, Miquon, PA, and furnished by W. F. Etherington & Co., New York. Bound by H. Wolfe Estate, New York. Transcriber's notes: obvious typographical errors have been corrected. Inconsistencies in hyphenation have been standardized. Archaic or variant spelling has been retained. New original cover art included with this ebook is granted to the public domain. End of the Project Gutenberg ebook. Buddenbrooks, Volume 2 of 2 updated editions will replace the previous one. The old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the General Terms of Use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances, and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start, full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Electronic Works 1.a. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the foundation or PGLOF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying, or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee, or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works provided that, you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f.1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects, such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2. Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs, and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive, or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3. Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4. Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5. Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6. Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion, and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs, and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark. Project Gutenberg trademark is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers including obsolete, old, middle-aged, and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's EIN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, Utah 841-16801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork, and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways including checks, online payments, and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S. unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks. Buddenbrooks 2 Part 7 Chapter I Chapter 2 Chapter 3 Chapter 4 Chapter V Chapter 6 Chapter 7 Chapter 8 Part 8 Chapter I Chapter 2 Chapter 3 Chapter 4 Chapter V Chapter 6 Chapter 7 Chapter 8 Chapter 9 Part 9 Chapter I Chapter 2 Chapter 3 Chapter 4 Part 10 Chapter I Chapter 2 Chapter 3 Chapter 4 Chapter V Chapter 6 Chapter 7 Chapter 8 Chapter 9 Part 11 Chapter I Chapter 2 Chapter 3 Chapter 4 The full Project Gutenberg License 123. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103. 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, 126, 127, 128, 129, 130, 131, 132, 133, 135, 136, 137, 138, 139, 140, 141, 142, 143, 144, 145, 146, 147, 148, 149, 150, 151, 152, 153, 154, 155, 156, 157, 158, 159, 160, 161, 162, 163, 164, 165, 166, 167, 168, 169, 170, 171, 172, 173, 174, 175, 176, 177, 178, 179, 180, 181, 182, 183, 184, 185, 186, 187. 188, 189, 190, 191, 192, 193, 194, 195, 196, 197, 198, 199, 200, 201, 202, 203, 204, 205, 206, 207, 208, 209, 210, 211, 212, 213, 214, 215, 216, 217, 218, 219, 220, 221, 222, 223, 224, 225, 226, 227, 228, 229, 230, 231, 232, 233, 234, 235, 236, 237, 238, 239, 240, 241, 242, 243, 244, 245, 246, 247, 247, 248, 249, 250, 251, 252, 253, 254, 255, 256, 257, 258, 259, 260, 261, 262, 263, 264, 265, 266, 267, 268, 269, 270. 271, 272, 273, 274, 275, 276, 277, 278, 279, 280, 281, 282, 283, 284, 285, 286, 287, 288, 289, 290, 291, 292, 293, 294, 295, 296, 297, 298, 299, 300, 301, 302, 303, 304, 305, 306, 307, 308, 309, 310, 311, 312, 313, 314, 315, 316, 317, 318, 319, 320, 321, 322, 323, 324, 325, 326, 327, 328, 329, 330, 331, 332, 333, 334, 335, 336, 337, 338, 339, 340, 341, 342, 343, 344, 345, 346, 347, 348, 349, 350, 351, 352, 353. 354, 355, 356, 357, 358, 359.